Ladies and gentlemen, it is your man recently in Japan, Jay Contra, and I thought I would do a pickup video where I cover all of the games that I bought in my 2.5 weeks in Japan. I want to start off with the very earliest. We have here Ninja Gaiden 3. I was recently playing the first Ninja Gaiden game, and I was so impressed by how cool it was. And I realized I didn't have the third one, so I might as well have picked it up when I could. I think I got that at a hard off somewhere. Also in the Super Famicom, in the Famicom library, is the remake of Dragon Quest 1 and 2 that was released for the Super Famicom. The first two Dragon Quests originally came out on the Famicom, but then they were so popular that they thought, why not have them on Nintendo's next generation system? I actually got a pretty good deal on this, so I'm very excited to have it. Speaking of Dragon Quest, here's Dragon Quest 11 that I picked up for the Switch. I know it came out for the PlayStation 4, but I feel like the best Dragon Quests are the ones for mobile platforms, simply because I can pick it up and play it whenever I want. And these are some freaking long games. Also, speaking of portable Dragon Quest, here's Dragon Quest 7, which is only like $10 in Japan because compared to however freaking, not only is the original PlayStation game absurdly expensive in the United States, but so too is the 3DS version, although it's not so bad, but Japan, it's just $10. Next up, let's go to the to me it's still next generation. We've got for the PlayStation 4 Resident Evil Village, or is it Resident Evil 8? I don't know what the actual term is for it, but I'm very excited. I've been playing through Resident Evil 7, which I've been having a lot of fun with, although I still think my favorite Resident Evil will always be classic Resident Evil. Following that, for the PlayStation 2, we have Final Fantasies 10 and 10-2. For some reason, I bought the international versions of these for the Japanese PlayStation 2, and those only, I think, have the English voiceovers, and I wanted to hear the Japanese voiceovers for the game. So I picked these originals up for the PlayStation 2, and I can't wait to play them. Following up with the PlayStation 1, I picked up a couple games. The first game I got in the junk for less than $1 American. I got Brave Fencer Musashi. It's not the best condition that I saw in a hard off. I think the best one I saw was like a total of $3 US. However, this has just got a little bit of browning to the label, and for $1, I couldn't really argue with the price, and hey, you know, I can at least try it out. Also for the PlayStation 1, I got the original Persona. This now means that I think I have all of the Personas except for like Persona 4 Golden for the Vita, which maybe one day I will get around to. But very excited to have Persona 1 because for some reason it keeps popping up in my YouTube algorithm. So there we go, got the original. The big hitters, actually, I'll save the big hitters. Yeah. So this pile over here is a lot of stuff that I picked up in Book Off that I might go in depth on another video, although there are two very special games at the very bottom that I picked up from Beep. But I got No More Heroes 3, which I'm very excited about. I've been waiting for this game for like a decade, ever since I played No More Heroes 2 back on the Wii. And then another game that I've been waiting a very long time for is Bayonetta 3. I kind of dragged my feet on buying it because I wanted the Japanese version, and here I finally have it. Sticking with more modernish games, also from Book Off, I got the first Yakuza game that was remade for the PlayStation 4. This is Ryuga Gotoku, I think that's how you say it. Yeah, Ryuga Gotoku Kiwami that came out for the PlayStation 4. This will let me get into the Yakuza franchise. Here's Resident Evil 7, also known as, well, yeah, in Japan, it's Biohazard 7 Resident Evil, and in America, it's Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which is a cool naming convention that they did, and I've having a lot of fun with it, although I do think it maybe is a little bit too gross. I should also point out that with all of these Resident Evil games, if you're buying the Japanese versions, you need to be careful depending on what you want, because this here is what's called the grotesque version, which is the Zero Z rating, which is sort of like the M, or it's almost even the adults only rating in Japan. And these are much bloodier than the original versions that are released in Japan, which are like the Zero D. And I'm a big scaredy cat. I don't like all the blood and gore in my games, so maybe I should have bought the Zero D version. But here you go. Here's the grotesque version, the Z versions of both Resident Evil 2 and 3 that were remade for the PlayStation 4. I have already finished Resident Evil 3, and God, do I freaking love this game. I love the remake, and I hear that 2 is even better, so I'm very excited to try those out. One that I'm not like super excited about is Resident Evil 5, which I picked up for the Japanese PS3, simply because I think I'm going to make a controversial opinion here, but I don't like Resident Evil 4 all that much. I actually think that was the beginning of the decline of the Resident Evil franchise, because Resident Evil 4 was popular, that went into Resident Evil 5, and then Resident Evil 6, I feel like, was probably a low point for the series. But that's just my personal opinion. Make sure you turn on your Wii U, folks, to make sure that it's not bricked, and I will be trying mine out with this copy of Pikmin 3 that I know is available for the Switch, but I wanted the original copy, and this is also like $7, so I couldn't really argue with that. We're going back to Nintendo, folks, because I now have 3 additional GameCube games, all of which I found at a book off in Kyoto. We've got Pokemon Coliseum that I paid about maybe $10-11 for. I also got F-Zero GX, which I've been waiting forever for because I'm a massive fan of the F-Zero franchise, and I really wish I could have every game except for that Game Boy Advance game that's like $300 now. Another game that I'm very pumped to have is Super Monkey Ball 2 for the GameCube. I actually finished Super Monkey Ball 1 not too long ago, and so I'm hoping they gave us more content in Super Monkey Ball 2 simply because I just wanted more of the same game. Following that up with another Nintendo game, we've got Phantom Hourglass, which I think is like a $35 game in the US. Here it is less than $4. Very excited to have this because I actually haven't played any of the Zelda games for the DS. I did play Link's Awakening 2 on the 3DS, and I had a lot of fun with that, so I'm looking very much forward to the DS games. Before I forget, let's talk about Resident Evil just one more time. I had to get the original Biohazard 3 for the PlayStation, meaning that I think I am just the original Resident Evil away from having a complete Resident Evil set. So very, very pumped about that. And also, speaking of sets, I'm adding to my Dragon Quest set here with my copy of Dragon Quest 3. This is another remake that came out for the Super Famicom. Very weird that for the Super Famicom got 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 in the Dragon Quest series. 4 would have, I think they released a version for the PlayStation, but it wouldn't get the real remake treatment, I think, until the DS. Although maybe the copy of 4 the port of 4 that they released was a remake. I'm not sure, I haven't played it yet. Also in the Dragon Quest series, a little bit tangentially, is this copy of Mystery Dungeon Totoneko's Adventure, which I've been looking all over Japan for, and I found in one place, and I got a pretty good deal on it because it was about $20. This is, to me, the OG Rouge-like, or at least, I guess, the Japanese version of roguelikes. And very excited to have this because this is the origin of Shiren the Wanderer, which is one of my favorite games for the Nintendo 64. So I'm very hyped to play this, especially after having played Hades for the Switch. Now, let's talk about the big hitters. So I'll actually leave my favorites for last, but I want to talk about the big games that I picked up while I was in Japan. And I think if you're watching this, my recommendation is that if you're going to visit Japan, you know, all of these games are things that I wanted and I'm going to play eventually, but there are also a lot of them are games that I could have found online via Surugaya or another website very easily, and I could have just had to ship to me and not really worry about, you know, bag space. The games I think I kind of wish I had bought in Japan would have been the more expensive titles that I could have seen and inspected in person before, you know, shelling out a lot of money for. So I'm going to give you some of the big games that I purchased, and I kind of wish instead of buying all of these smaller titles, I had gone with a few bit bigger ones, but I'm still very satisfied with my purchases. The big one, I think, for me is Metal Gear Ghost Babel, which I picked up from Mandarake, the Metal Gear game that came out for the Game Boy Color. That people don't often talk about. I'm not actually 100% sure that it's canon anymore, but still, it's a Metal Gear game, and I freaking love Metal Gear, probably my favorite video game franchise of all time, which unfortunately is probably long gone at this point. Another of my favorite franchises is Final Fantasy, and after playing Final Fantasy IV for the Game Boy Advance during the time of COVID, I had so much fun with that I wanted to get the other copies of Final Fantasy for the Game Boy Advance. So I picked up Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI, which I also picked up at Monterake. And because these were seen as sort of like C-grade games, I got a real discount compared to buying it through Surugaya. Possibly my second favorite video game franchise of all time is Castlevania, and that meant I was looking all over the place for a Japanese copy of Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. I now finally have all the Game Boy Advance Castlevanias. I know there was a version that came out for the Switch that you can download, but I just had to have all of the Game Boy cartridges, and now I have them all complete in box. Very happy about that. The last two games that I want to talk about are games that I picked up from Beep. Something that I'm undertaking is consoleizing a Neo Geo MVS. And so I figured while I was in Japan, I might as well pick up some games because I knew they were going to be authentic and I knew they were going to work. So I put some money into this copy of Shock Troopers Second Squad, which is actually a real weird coincidence for me because I started playing it when I was just like trying out Neo Geo games. And this is such a fun late entry in the Neo Geo that I just had to have it. And they had such a great price at Beep that I had to pick it up. Now, the thing about Beep that you should be aware of is that sometimes they will have original like instructions and arcade inserts with the game. However, these are copies. Now, I was just in it to have the cartridge because I freaking love MVS cartridges. But these are copies of the inserts. However, I do have original inserts with my copy of Shin Samurai Spirits, also known as Samurai Showdown 2. The inserts that were included with this are not copies. These are the originals. So if I ever one day, and I hope I do, have an original Neo Geo MVS cabinet, I can slide these bad boys right in. They'll actually tell you at Beep whether or not the inserts are original, so you don't need to worry about that. I think it's somewhere on here. Yeah, actually on the label, unfortunately it's in Japanese, so you might want to ask the people at the counter, but it does say in Japanese that the paraphernalia is original with the MVS cartridge. So also look out for that if you're purchasing arcade games in Japan, although I've only really ever seen Beep do this. I've been to Mac Japan, I've been to the Surugaya that's in Akihabara. They also have MVS cartridges, but it's only at Beep that I've seen these extras thrown in with the cartridge. So this was the result of 2 weeks in Japan. I love everything that I picked up, and that's why I bought it. I talked about why maybe I kind of wish I bought some rarer games, because a lot of these games, like especially when you're talking about DS, PlayStation, Wii U, all of those sort of more recent-ish titles, and especially, you know, if they're in these hard plastic cases, they're not going to get bumped around while they're being shipped to you. And the only problem is that you're going to be paying like a lot in terms of shipping on these games. For example, this Pikmin 3 would probably have cost an extra $4 to ship here to the United States. So the base cost of this is like what? $8 if you buy it in Japan, and even if you buy it on Surugai's website, it's going to be $8. But then you also have to factor in an additional $4 for shipping, which you can save if you buy a lot of stuff from Surugaya. But once again, I think if you are going to visit Japan and you consider yourself a serious collector, instead of buying a large volume of stuff, which is now getting harder and harder, I would suggest buying rare games that you really, really want and that you can afford, and that you can find some really good deals on them if you shop around. And perhaps most importantly, you can see them with your own two eyes before you plunk down your cash. I've been your man out of Japan, Jay Contra. I stream every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over at twitch.tv/JayContra. I hope to see you there every Sunday at 7 p.m. Thanks for watching. See you next time, and mahalo.